Welcome. I'm Danielle Sally.
And I'm Eva Fusa.
And you're listening to Ghost Boss, stories about the freelance afterlife. Hey, Ghosties.
Hey.
Hi, Eva. How are you?
I'm doing good. How are you?
Yeah, I'm good.
Yeah?
You know what I did this week?
What did you do?
I went to USC, University of South Carolina.
Yeah.
Like, I need to tell our Columbia people that, but just want to make sure the non-Columbia people are aware. But I went to USC to talk to the students at their ad club, or their ad team rather, at the J-School there. And it was such a good discussion. I loved it.
Look at you talking to people.
I know, inspiring people.
Oh,
but
I'm
what's
so
funny,
proud of you as an
afterwards, one of the other panelists and myself, we were talking about how we were second guessing everything we said to the students. And one of the students wrote back and they're like, no, you left so many people inspired. So many people, I heard people talking in the halls later. So it was really cool. I loved it. But I bring it up because one thing that I said to the students was one of the professors said it and I made sure it was brought home. But I said, if you quit a job, you leave with grace.
Yes. And that makes sense.
Exactly.
With who's in the room right now?
Right now, we have Heather Price from Chernoff Newman. While I was there, she was my direct supervisor for 9 of my 10 years. Makes you wonder who that 10th year that person.
I know. What happened?
Who was that?
That was David Campbell. It's nothing against him.
Oh, gosh. I was going to say, are we bringing that person on? David will be on this podcast.
We'll bring him on at some point.
I'm not ready yet. I don't know that the ghosties are ready.
The ghosties need some time, but if the ghosties want to earn money, they'll listen to David Campbell.
Yes,
I'll just say that.
True.
But we have Heather Price here. You're the president of client engagement and marketing at Chernoff Newman. But when I started there, you were our creative director.
Yes.
And I worked with you, as I said, 9 of those 10 years that I was there. You've moved up since then. So we wanted to welcome you to Ghost Boss today, because I think a lot of what our freelancers like to hear about is how do I get in with agencies?
Sure.
What are agencies looking for? And so we really thought it'd be great to kind of bring you in, especially from the creative side.
You bet.
But now as someone who is a shareholder at an agency.
I've been a shareholder since 2017.
Which is a big deal. So I wanted to kind of have you on so we can talk about all of those things for our ghosties.
Can I tell your ghosties something about the School of Journalism?
Yeah.
Please do.
Please do.
So we've been working with the College of Information and Communication.
Yep.
College of Information and Communication. I'm a J-School kid from UNC, but USCs are trying really hard to rebrand themselves. So we're going to call them the College of Information and Communication from here on out. It's a hard thing to break. I know. It's hard.
We call ourselves J-School kids,
I know. It's hard.
It's fine. USC will fight you over the word of. So why not fight over this?
It's funny. 2 years ago, I was talking to somebody and he said that he did his PhD at USC through the J-School. And I was like, USC or U of SC or whatever they're calling themselves these days. Tell me about when you were in Columbia. Because it's just so clunky. But anyways, I digress.
The journalism school is a part of the College of
Yes, it is.
Yes.
Because it merged.
I can't even say it. I had to write it down. Information and Communication.
Yes.
It's hard.
CIC?
CIC.
Yes.
CIC is
I don't know if they ever say CIC.
They say CIC.
They do. Because
there's so many initialisms and acronyms.
Look at you. I was there when it merged because it was just the journalism school. And then it merged with information science, which was like the library sciences were. And so they merged like when I was like a junior.
Yeah.
Senior, maybe. It's been a long time since they merged. Yeah.
It's just hard not to think of ourselves as journalism.
Right.
We are always journalism. We are J-School kids.
For life.
For life.
You bet.
Life.
Yeah. So what we ask all of our guests, you're the second one, so now we officially ask all of them. We like to know, what is your origin story? How did you get to this moment? And it's obviously a lengthy one.
I was going to say, how long do we have?
Wherever you want to start in your life journey to how you got to this current role at Chernoff Newman.
Okay. Yeah. We record to a cloud, so you're not even like perfect constrained to what's on my laptop.
So back when I was in second grade.
Wow. That might be the earliest.
Yeah.
Right?
I think Mina and I last week were like, we were 15.
Yeah.
But we're going 7. Cool.
Yeah.
Nice.
Love that.
One up.
There were 2 things I love to do. Make up stories, like writing stories and taking photos. I mean, like I followed my brother around. I have so many pictures of my brother because I was the kid who had the disc camera around my neck at all times. So photography has always been something that I love, but I also like to really write stories. And I would make up stories and characters. And from a very young age, I mean, I just remember sitting at my little table and that's what I did. So when I was in, we called it junior high because I'm old. When I was in junior high school.
I don't think it's an age thing. I think it's a regional thing because some people still say junior high.
I think there are still places.
Yeah,
okay,
don't worry.
Yeah, I think it's more of a regional thing.
Back when I was in junior high school, I wrote for the newspaper and I also took the yearbook class.
Yeah.
And yearbook's kind of where I fell in love with tying together photos and stories.
Yeah.
And did that in high school too. And being the nerd that I am, wanted to do a conceptual yearbook when I was the editor, and we entered it into a Jostens. They're still around. We entered it into a contest, and it won.
Woo!
Yes, and I was.
See, all the good ones also start with awards.
Yes.
Yeah, I mean yeah.
So as a junior, I got to go to New York City for the first time.
That's a big deal.
Where are you from?
I grew up in Durham, North Carolina.
Okay, all right.
And so went to New York. It's the first time I've been on a plane. It was like a workshop for all these kids who had come up with conceptual yearbooks and knew I was sold on that's what I wanted to do. Went to the University of North Carolina.
Ooh.
I know.
UNC.
UNC.
That's right. Nobody's fighting you about that name. People find us when we say USC.
Yeah. Studied journalism there, wrote for the paper my freshman year, just really realized that the truth is okay to write about, but making up stories is way more fun. And so in the journalism school, there is an advertising track and jumped right into that. I took photos for the yearbook there in college too. But once I got into my advertising classes, I was like, this is it. This is what I'm doing with my life.
Yeah.
Graduated, knew I wanted to stay in the Southeast. And I got a couple of job offers. One, this is so crazy because back in the day, Nashville was not as big as it is now.
Yeah.
But they were like, we kind of need somebody in like August. And I wanted to work. So I wanted to just get into the job force so badly. And I have a really random story about how I got to Columbia that I can tell you too. It has to do with creative too. But moved to Columbia without knowing a soul. Thought I'd be here for 2 years and it's been over 25. So worked my way up from copywriter. I have a story about how I got my foot in the door as an account person because that's what they were hiring, but always kept knocking on the door to be a copywriter and made that happen. About 2 years of being in the agency and have just grown up. I was copywriter. I was senior copywriter. I was creative director. I was chief creative officer, bought part of the agency, moved into the president's role where I now oversee kind of head of accounts. So anything that has to do with advertising and marketing, I oversee the team of folks who are running that.
Cool. And then, of course, I'm already going to go off of our questions.
I told you it's hard. She gave me so much flack last week.
I did. I thought it felt natural.
You got a little sassy about it. It's okay. Go ahead.
It's fine.
Go ahead.
But then thinking about it, how is that going from you were creative director for so long? Like creativity is just in your blood. It's like we say this all the time. You're born with that.
Yeah.
How has it been moving from creative director to this leadership role? And then now there's another creative director there, and you could be, I don't know if you are or not, you could be more hands off with create. Like how is that a struggle? Because I feel like,
weird.
yes,
it's weird. Creative is always in your bones. So no matter what role you take as an agency, you have an ability to really be a part of the creative process. We looked for a really long time, near and far, to find Dan, who is our creative director. Group creative director is his title. And he is honestly somebody who I feel like has been at the agency for 10 years.
Oh, that's awesome.
He folded right into the mix. But it is weird to kind of be like, okay, so here's how we did it for years. Yeah. I can't wait to hear what you have to say.
And your thoughts. Yeah, it's fine.
But we still spend a lot of time together, even though, and he started my birthday in January.
Oh, that's easy to remember then, right?
Yes, it's easy to remember. And like I said, he brings a lot of big agency experience to the table without big agency ego.
Oh, even better.
And it's just like we've been working together forever. So the hardest part is not being in the day-to-day, seeing how the campaign, like writing on a campaign, or, sometimes I'll still get pulled into a conceptual conversation. but I have to let it go after that. And it's weird. Like, it's so weird, but it's exciting too, because when the ideas come back and you're able to see how they grew and evolved. Yeah. It's really amazing. The really plus to it, like, so that's the weird part of it. But the really exciting part is to take all of these client engagement folks and help them realize what a voice they have in making sure that we're doing our very best work, and that creative is a part of everything that we do. So that's super engaging and exciting, and they're there for it. They're like, yes, let's figure this out. So they're the ones closest to the client. They're going to know what's best, and they have a voice in everything. And it's just reminding them of that. I always also say that they're the folks who can look at something and say, is this right? Or is this, is this great enough?
And we don't always want to hear it.
That's right.
But sometimes they're right.
I know.
Just never.
Creatives?
No.
Have an opinion? And they presented you with the best solution from the beginning. And they're only asking feedback to be nice.
Never.
Yeah. So that's been a learning process.
For sure. I was curious about that, because I started writing these questions. I'm like, you know what? The thing I really want to know, that seems like it'd be hard to really let go of that.
It is hard. But Dan and Trevor and Elizabeth Prim have all been very generous and tap me on the shoulder quite a bit still. So it's not like I'm completely out the door.
You're not gone.
So, no, I'm not gone. I'm not gone.
Of course.
Yeah.
So one thing that I always loved and appreciated, and I thought about this too, because one time when I was at Chernoff, one of my direct reports towards the end, she had come up to me saying how much it meant to her to have a female manager, because she hadn't had, in pretty much her entire career has always been male managers. And I was like, oh, I didn't really even think about that before. And like, it meant a lot to me.
Yeah.
And I was thinking about it. I was like, I've been very fortunate to have really strong female managers, Heather being one of them.
The bass in your voice went up. It's really strong. Like, you just I love it. Like, that's going to, when I edit this, is going to be like a big,
I'm sure it's going to be, I am apologizing for that.
That's great. I love it.
But one of the things, and you and I have had this conversation so many times, and I think it'd be great for you to kind of share with our listeners too, of, you are a great example of someone who can be in a leadership role, successful at their career, and a really great mom. And we have had this conversation so many times, because when I started at Chernoff Newman, I thought about this. Your kids were the age
of yours.
My child is now. And when I was pregnant when I started at Chernoff Newman. And I had my child while I was at not at Chernoff Newman, but
in the building.
In the building. They really make you work there. And so you and I have had a lot of conversations from that when I was early into motherhood, of trying to make sure balance. And then, of course, COVID, that everything's different now. But I feel like pre-COVID working mom was there's a whole different stress level now, but that was a nutty stress level then. And you always gave me such great advice. But what is maybe some advice that you would give to other women who are working moms right now?
It is so different between pre-COVID and post-COVID mom bosses.
And I would say each with their own challenges, but they are so different.
Yeah, I think coming up, and this is very different today too, regardless of whether you have kids or not. I was taught in college that if you didn't come in on Saturday, don't bother coming in on Sunday. It was this whole
I mean, that was the mindset.
That was the mindset. And the hardest thing I had to juggle was making sure I felt like I was doing my job as best as I could and being the best mom that I could be. Mm-hmm. And I kind of felt like I failed at both for a long time.
Yeah.
It's just like, you look back. I mean, sometimes I look back and I'm just like, I don't even remember being, I'll see a picture and I was like, I don't even remember being there, because your brain is so tired.
Yeah.
And then you think harder and you're like, oh yeah, that was a really good time. Like, I was there.
It's because I think when you look back, you think of, your brain remembers the highlights, right? Like the highlight reel. And
that's why people have two babies now.
Yeah, literally, there's a reason. You look back, you're like, oh, look at all the great things. And it's like, oh, but I forgot about these other very specific things.
Yeah.
You remember the things that you put on your social media highlight reel.
Exactly.
Not literally.
The memories, like that's what it is. Those memories comes up. So I think the biggest piece of advice I would offer now being, this is a very touching time for me I'm an empty nester for the first time. We're still trying to get used to that, but you have to make time for yourself. And I did not do that.
I will tell you didn't. I think I did tell you didn't.
I've had plenty of people tell me. I've had people say at the office, I don't want to be like Heather because all she does is work.
Yeah.
And I love it. And I can't imagine it any other way. But I didn't make time for myself.
Right.
I did my job and I did what I needed to do for my kids. I probably should apologize to Ty because I probably wasn't the best wife during those times either because it was those two things. And that was the priority. So my advice would be find time to make time for yourself. And that's a hard ask.
Yeah.
You need a really good support system to make that happen.
No, definitely. And you mentioned Ty. Ty also works at the agency.
He does.
Yes.
People think we're crazy.
You're our second guest in a row that works with their partner.
Okay.
Yeah, so
they
far,
do exist.
all our guests work with their husbands. It's weird.
Yeah. When's Will going to start working at Danielle Sally?
Oh, listen, no.
All right.
He actually probably love it. But how do you balance working with your husband?
So we have a couple of rules.
Yes.
Which he was very good at in the beginning, way better at it than I was. His rule was we don't talk about work at home.
Yep. It's a good rule.
How hard is that to adhere to?
It was really hard for me at first.
I feel like it'd
back in those
for
days,
you
it was way
him.
harder for me.
Okay.
And plus, back then, you didn't take work home. Like you worked at the office until 9
so you weren't like,
So like once you were ready to leave, it was like, let's go start drinking.
See, Eva, this is why they gave us laptops.
Yes, exactly.
She was like, why do you have a laptop? Like, so we take our work home.
Because I have a big, everywhere I've ever been, they've given me a big desktop because for a while, those were where the bigger hard drives were, right?
Yeah.
And
all the art directors always got the
big thing.
Always.
And so then I had this little I've always had two computers, but it was like a personal laptop. So I'm like, every time I have to work just on my laptop, I email her and I'm or text her and I'm like,
I don't know how you do this.
How do you only work on this? I feel like I go and work at home and it's like a movie theater.
Yes. I want to be in an IMAX theater.
Literally.
Zooming in on those pixels.
Like, what are these little tiny baby kids?
Yeah. So that was the first rule was don't, this was very early on. Don't talk about work at home. And when we're at the office, we're colleagues. We're not husband and wife. It really bothers me if somebody says, if they put something on paper, like it's Heather and Ty Price.
Yeah.
Like I'm an individual, I'm Heather Price and he's an individual and he's Ty Price.
Right.
Don't call me a spouse in the office.
Yeah.
So it's kind of also letting other people know those are our rules because that helps them. Because let me tell you, when you have a creative director and a strategy person in a room, I mean, you've experienced this.
Oh, yeah.
And I've experienced it as a client.
Yeah,
So,
right.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And you are fighting for what's best for your client. There's arguments that happen.
Sure.
They're not personal. They are what is best for the client.
Sure.
And it can be very uncomfortable for everybody else. Like I would stop and look around the room. And I was like, everybody looks horrified.
We'd been looking down.
Mom and Dad are fighting at the dinner table.
It felt like that. It's like mom and dad are fighting again. Oh no. And like great arguments, by the way.
Yeah,
fantastic arguments. Right. We always had the best work if we were with Heather and Ty. But we would be like, oh no.
And it was always about the idea. So letting other people know, hey, this is not personal. I'm talking to Ty as my colleague.
Yeah.
And when we leave here, we can argue later about whether that was an appropriate argument or not, but that's when it gets personal, right?
Yeah.
So it was, those are kind of our two rules, and it's worked for us for a really long time.
And I will say, from someone who was an employee, you always did a great job separating the two. I can't tell you how many client meetings we were in where at the end of the meeting, the client finally put together that they're married, and they're shocked.
But other people, when I was a client in the meeting, would put it together after y'all left.
Right.
Yeah,
so
would ask. They'd be like, "Oh, I just thought they had the same last name,"
which happens a lot.
Yeah, y'all don't have like a weirdly unusual last name. Yeah.
So that's been very intentional, and it has helped us both grow in our own careers.
Yeah.
And be individuals who happen to be married outside of it. But I got to tell y'all, I mean, like Chernoff Newman, Rick and Rachel Silver work together. David and Suzette Anderson work together. Yeah. There's somebody else that I'm forgetting.
There's been many relationships.
I mean, when David Campbell came to Chernoff Silver, Reba's dad worked there. So it's just, it was a big agency thing, not just in Columbia, but the agency world is small. Y'all know this.
Yep.
And you work all the time. So guess what? Your pool.
And that is why you leave
hang
with
out
grace.
with. Yes.
Because it's too small. I don't care if
Yes.
you're in New York City or Columbia,
You're
South
exactly
Carolina.
right.
This industry talks.
Yes.
So you make sure if you leave a job, you leave it well.
Yeah.
So we're having you on today. It's obviously a podcast about freelancing.
I like that it's obviously a podcast.
It's obviously a podcast. You see the equipment here?
Hello, everybody who's listening.
People are listening right
An
now.
Apple podcast.
But we brought you on. You're obviously not a freelancer. Have you ever done freelancing?
I have done at the beginning of my career, I did some freelance work writing.
Yeah.
And I loved your the etymology of where the freelance.
Oh yeah,
comes
freelance.
From.
Yeah. So
I thought that was really cool.
If you're not in Club Evo, part of the 400 and some odd people who follow my personal Instagram account, freelance is a term that came from knights that didn't have a lord. They would free lance. They would stab people for free, and they didn't have somebody they were attached to. That's where the term comes from. So now I'm a knight.
We're knights now.
I know.
I love it.
Ghost knights.
I have a very warm, loving spot for Howard Helms, who is the king of writers out of South Carolina. And when I came into the agency, he was on his way out, and he would sit back in his office and he chain smoked. It was the one office where we were allowed to. He was allowed to smoke it, and I would just go and shoot the breeze with him to try and soak up as much knowledge as I could. And he would throw me projects every once in a while. He's like, "Hey, someone asked me to do this. Can you do this?" And I would be like, "So what do I charge for this?
Yeah,
how does this work?" And so the freelance stuff that I did was really the things that Howard didn't want to do is what I did when I first started my career.
Sure.
But it was great. And then we got super busy and I just kind of stopped doing that.
Yeah.
So
makes sense. And I think I've said this too. When I was working full time at the agency, the idea of doing freelance on the side.
One job is enough.
I think even I didn't take a lot of freelance work in-house because I think if you're a full-time creative anywhere and that's a designer or a writer, whatever, if you're a full-time creative, when are you going to find time?
I know, exactly. Remember, make time for yourself.
Exactly.
Right. That has to be a part of it.
Exactly.
Yeah. It's hard enough being a creative all day, every day.
Yeah.
Yep.
For sure. But for our freelancers, as someone working at the agency, what are some things that you feel like agencies can take advantage of working for freelancers? And what are some things that you're looking for when you are trying to find freelancers?
So like any job, relationships are important, and being able to meet people and see their work and either have worked for them as a client or with them at the agency always is a bonus.
Another good reason to leave with grace.
Yes, totally.
Because they can become your client.
Yeah. So I think that's one way to do it is you get to know people and you get to know what they're really good at so that when you are looking at your staff, if you've got projects coming in and gosh, we need a bigger bench, you kind of know what people are really great at and know that you can tap them on the shoulder and say, "Hey, we'd like to bring you into the team to help out with this." That's one way. I think another way that that we look at it is if it's supplementing something that we don't do. So Nell on our staff is a fantastic illustrator, but she's really the only illustrator that we have right now on staff. And I draw stick people, but I don't.
No, but that's different.
We can all draw things,
right? Exactly.
Is
so
different.
It's knowing the folks who can add to a concept or a project that you don't have in house. So on the freelance side of things, it's always showing updated work and what you're really great at. And I know, you said you went and saw people. That's still a thing. You have to network, and AAF is great for that.
Yep.
Going to the creative mornings where that's going on is a great way to do that. I wish Columbia had a creative mornings.
Yeah. What do we got to do?
I know. I don't know what
we've been
to
trying to get a coffee meetup for AAF. Part of the problem is it's not a problem, but we already have so much legacy programming. We do a luncheon every month, and so we've been talking, we've been batting around. Yeah, maybe it'll happen.
Charleston has one. Charlotte has one.
Yeah,
I feel like Columbia.
It's time. We deserve coffee too.
Deserve coffee too. So it's connecting there. It's nobody likes the cold call or the cold email.
No.
That's so hard. But I feel like you do have to be a really great self-promoter because somebody's going to go to your book immediately.
Oh, yeah.
Right. So
Yeah.
you have to, you might not be sending stuff out, but your stuff better be up on your website. So when somebody does say, oh, I remember this person, I'm going to go check them out. You don't want it to look, 15 years old.
Yeah.
This is why when anybody asks me for my portfolio, say chernoffnewman.com.
Yeah. That was the best. And I will say when I worked there, that was the best because now I'm a freelancer and I launched my site over a year ago now and I haven't even updated it. So
gosh, I know.
It's a thing. It happens.
It does happen. You make the least amount of time for your own work.
I mean, Instagram kind of saves you in a little bit.
Instagram does. I do think because I remember
you're great at this.
Oh, thank you.
That
means a lot,
especially because I don't ever post to my business account.
Especially since you're the president of client engagement and marketing. But I try to think about that because it takes a little bit more time to get something on your website. It doesn't take me very long to throw something on social, not throw it on, but like obviously there's thought put involved, but take something I've done recently and get it on social because I don't have my latest work. And then in my case, because I do work with a lot of agencies, I can't necessarily always show my work.
Yeah.
So I have a lot of work that I can't show. So it's about trying to find things that I can put out there.
Yeah.
So I maybe can't put a whole case study together for my website, but I can put it together, a social post that can go on my social media channel.
Yeah. Do you have a clause in your contract asking if you can publish the work?
Usually I have to ask for permission, and there's been cases like Chernoff Newman. I've asked for permission, and then we have to go through the client too to make sure that they're okay with it. But also I think it's also just part of my best practice that I'd rather be safe than sorry. So I always make sure, hey, even if we don't have it in there, I always still make sure, are you cool if I post this online?
Yeah. I have it in my contract.
Yeah.
I remove it for agencies because the first agent, I just gave them my boilerplate contract. The first agency I worked with, and they're like, no. I was like, okay.
Yeah, they'll give you theirs.
Agencies don't like it. I'm like, that's fine. And then I had one client that worked for a law firm that was like, no.
Not going to happen.
And which was
totally fine.
Yeah. Most of the time people are fine though. They're like,
I think that's the difference too with agencies versus doing work directly for a client is knowing that you are going to be a part of a bigger team. And so a lot of times we ask very nicely for an agency rate versus what you would charge a client.
Yeah. Right.
Because we have margins to protect too.
Yeah.
And it's always good, I feel like, when everyone feels like it's fair. Like, like, okay, I didn't really want to give them this, it's $5 less than I wanted to charge an hour.
Right.
But I also get, X, Y, or Z. I get to be able to promote the work in the long run. So I think it's just taking it. And sometimes that's project by project for us. It depends on our clients and how comfortable they are. But it's just understanding that you're working together.
Yeah.
Like it's not I'm going to give you this little thing and I'm going to go away.
Sure.
I feel like it's very collaborative.
Yeah, it has to be.
Well, and then part of it too, if I'm working through an agency, I'm not also having to play account manager.
Right.
I'm not also having to do all these extra things that I would have to do if I'm working directly with the client. So an agency rate, I always felt like made sense. And it might be because I'm from the agency side, but it always made sense to me because a lot of the presentation to the clients I'm not in anymore.
Right.
Like, so all the stuff that it's not, I don't have to worry about it because the agency's worrying about it, which is nice.
That's the give and take.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So how do you, because I know Chernoff Newman has a certain set of values that you can say them if you have them memorized.
Is that like a requirement?
No,
that you know them?
But what do you do to find and vet freelancers? Do you try to make sure that they are in line with your agency values, or do you just kind of look at skill sets?
So we start with skill set.
Yeah.
And the folks that we know, we kind of know if they are going to be really human centric and
if they vibe or not, right?
Right,
yeah.
exactly.
Yeah.
So it is some of it's test the waters and see, right?
Yeah.
So start with skill set, and then you might do something with someone and just realize this is not a good
fit
for
whatever
fit,
reason, right?
Yeah. And that would be value based.
Yes.
I wouldn't say we go as far as like stalk an Instagram or something to see if there's anything weird. We do believe very strongly in everybody has a voice. But there's some topics that we would stray away from just because of who our clients are and have to be mindful of that. But it's not like we're going out and doing that ahead of time.
Yeah, sure.
So
makes sense.
Yeah, that's a great question though. I mean, I think because the agency world is so small, if somebody has done something egregious, you're going to know about it
before you talk to them. That's a fair statement.
So you kind of can, just if you talk to a few different people, what you're getting or not getting. Ahead of time.
Yeah, for sure. All right. Well, we are loving this conversation. What we're going to do, we're going to put an end to it this week. And then we're going to come back for part 2 next week with Heather Price.
That's right. I've got questions. Last time I asked Mina about her star signs. So we're going to talk about star sign, moon sign, your rising sign. And if you don't know.
I don't know. So
I'm going to think Heather's not going to know.
I know nothing.
Do you know your zodiac sign at all?
I mean, I'm a Capricorn.
Yes.
We'll get into it next week. Okay. All right. Thanks, everyone.
Thanks for listening, everybody.
Bye.
Bye. Remember to follow us on Instagram at Ghost Boss Podcast. And also, please like and review us on your favorite podcast app.